Join us on this week's episode of the DevOps Lab, where myself and Damon Stoddard are taking a deep dive into Azure DevOps retrospectives. So tune in because you don't want to miss this. Welcome to this episode of the DevOps Lab. I have a very, very special guest with us, Damon. Damon, welcome to your first episode of the DevOps Lab.
Thank you, April. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm really excited to have you here. You and I are going to talk about a really cool integrated part of Azure DevOps to everyone out there. So tell everyone who you are and what it is you do for Microsoft.
Yeah, so Damon Stoddard, I've actually been at Microsoft for 20 years last week. Currently, I'm a high-performing team coach. And I've got a background in Six Sigma, Master Black Belt in Six Sigma, and also an Agile coach. But really, I spend a lot of my time now helping teams really learn how to thrive using this capability we've built into Azure DevOps retrospectives.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I love using retrospectives. We talk about the importance of ceremonies in the Agile process and honoring those. And when I talk to people about retrospectives built into Azure DevOps, there's so many cool things we can do with it. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, so maybe just to share, can I just share just a little bit of background about retrospectives and why we
Absolutely.
do retrospectives? So a couple of years ago, right before COVID-19 hit, my manager said, hey, Damon, I want you to go out and tell us how to measure productivity. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, but it gave me a lot of time and space to research how to measure productivity. And after a couple of months, I came back just to say, you know what? It's really difficult to measure productivity for knowledge workers. But I found a lot of really cool stuff to help knowledge workers be a lot more productive. And one of the things that I discovered was something that I'd known all along intuitively, but my research pointed to this idea of retrospectives or debriefs. In fact, the research that I found indicated that teams that regularly do retrospectives and debrief are between 20 and 25% more effective. Retrospectives are something that a team can do in literally as little as 15 minutes to maybe an hour max. And it's going to help them be way, way, way more productive.
Absolutely. And I think it's honoring those ceremonies and those principles because we can then make things better going into the next sprint cycle, the next iteration every time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I got to do is I got to do a lot of research on other factors. And I came across yet another study, the State of DevOps report, 2018 State of DevOps report, that talked about elite performing software development teams. And they identified these elite performing development teams and identified that an elite development team is 1.5 times more likely to consistently conduct retrospectives. Okay. And so what I'd like to do today is I'd like to just kind of show you the tooling. It's incredible. The other thing about retrospectives, it's incredibly easy to do. I can show it to you. If you haven't seen it, you can get started immediately and start experiencing the benefits of a team.
Awesome. Team. Take it away. I love retrospective, so I'm excited to share this with everyone out there.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, I've got my team standing by here, and I'm going to start out just kind of within Azure DevOps, and I'm going to come down here to boards, and I'm going to go retrospectives. Now, if you don't have retrospectives installed in your Azure DevOps, it's really easy to do. It's an extension. We can talk about that offline, but I'm going to open up the retrospectives board. And while we're waiting for it to load, I've got my software development team in the background waiting for us. And we've done a number of retrospectives, but I'm just going to create a new retrospective. I'm going to go to these dots here, and I'm going to hit this button, create a retrospective. And the title today is just going to be, we're just going to call it our YouTube show here. And the first here gives us the number of votes. I like to just stick with the defaults, quite frankly. We'll talk about votes in a sec. This include team assessment. We're not going to do it on the first retrospective, but we're going to do it on the second retrospective. So I'm going to reduce that. I'm going to remove that checkbox. And then we have these other ones, obscure the feedback after the others until after the collect phase. I'm going to keep that unchecked. I'll talk to you about the Prime Directive and do not display names and feedback. I like to keep retrospectives anonymous until I know it's psychologically safe on the team, and I'll talk about that in a sec. So down here, we have the ability to apply templates, lots of different templates. We're going to stick with the default template, just ask the team what went well, what didn't go well. But then we're going to add a couple of columns here. I just hit that add column, and I've noticed a lot of teams have added this kudos column, right? And another column that I'm going to add is this one action. And this one action next sprint is an idea that we've learned that really can accelerate creation of a retrospective. And then I'm going to hit save. And what it does is it creates a new board where our team members can add cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under here, and this is a super important step. I'm going to copy the retrospective link, and I'm going to get my team in the background, start populating this field. So I've got them in the background here. And I'm just going to say, go ahead and get started. And what we're going to notice here is these cards are going to start populating. But before we do that, there's this Prime Directive, which I recommend everybody reads to get started as a retro. And it says the Prime Directive, the purpose of the Prime Directive is to assure that a retrospective has the right culture to make it a positive and result-oriented event. It makes a retrospective become an effective team gathering to learn and find solutions to improve the way of working. Regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills, abilities, resources available, and situations at hand. Stated differently, we want to choose to believe that any issues we find are process problems, not people problems. And what you can see here is my team is in the background actually adding cards, thinking about the previous sprint. And I'm going to just zoom it down so we can see those just a little bit more. But they're just literally, they just click this new add feedback card and they're adding cards to the retro, right? And it's kind of neat. This is a software development team that's just getting started, and you can see some of the things they've added is clear customer requirements. They've got a Scrum Master as a safe place to ask questions. Great customer demo, but then they're talking about some of the things that didn't go so well. They said that they have a Scrum Master. In this particular case, the Scrum Master didn't have time to help them. They were too busy, not able to complete many of the tasks that they did. Those types of things. Kudos. Thanking the people for what they did during the previous sprint. And you can see literally within 5 minutes, what can happen with a retrospective is that the team literally can go in and get all of the ideas out. It's a virtual sticky board.
Yeah.
And so,
and I love that everyone's doing this live, and that's what everyone out there watching this has to remember. You've literally sent them the link. You're actually running the retro live without everyone having to be on a call, or because I've seen retros where everyone's on a call and maybe you give 2 to 5 minutes to fill out the board, etc. So this is great that you're doing this almost async, but all together.
Yeah, it is really cool. So what we've got now is, Teams chats are coming up letting me know. I'm going to zoom it down just a little bit more because I want to show some people this ability to group these cards, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do is I want to group the action cards, because the thing about a retrospective is it's not about the feedback is great, but if it doesn't result in action, it really just becomes another ceremony. And so what we want to do here is we want to look at ideas that are similar. So I click on this group tab and look at ideas that are similar. So it looks like there might be a theme here for perhaps something about capacity, right? So there's this code quality here, peer reviews. I'm going to zoom down just a little bit more so I can see it. And ensure we don't overpromise and commit to more than 70% capacity. So I'm going to just grab this and I'm just going to drag it here. And it's just like a virtual sticky board. And then there's this code quality issues and these code peer reviews. So I'm going to group those together as well. And now I'm going to have my team click on the vote tab. And I'm going to say, everybody gets 5 votes. Go ahead and go vote on what matters the most. So I'm going to say, please vote on top items.
And everyone gets 5 votes. I think, and like you said, that's the default. And that's usually a good amount. If you have a good amount of people in your team, you have quite a good amount of feedback here. Usually 5 votes is pretty easy to allocate.
Yep. So and I just want to show you how this works. This Scrum Master idea. So, I can come in here, I can click that, and you can see up here at the top, it tells me how many votes that I've used.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also, while this is going on in the background, I can drop down these dots and I can show a retrospective summary. And I can see that I've got 6 participants have casted 19 votes. They've created 30 feedback items here. So it looks like they're voting in the background. Let's just see what pops up here. Looks like there's a lot of votes for peer reviews, a lot of votes for Scrum Master. And so what I like to do is I like to just confirm that all the votes have happened. Then I click on this Act button, and this is really kind of cool. So what happens when you click on the Act button is it sorts the votes in the order of most voted on the team, and I call this team sourcing. And literally, this team in the background, I think we started this 5 minutes ago. I think, April. Yeah, this team in the background has identified that if they just had allocated a bit more capacity to Scrum Master duties, that maybe it would help them. And so they've decided to do that in this sprint. And they've also decided to do peer reviews. So what we're going to do is just add a work item, literally embedded in Azure DevOps. We're going to just call it a user story. And it'll open up another screen. And I'm going to just say, Brian, to allocate a bit more time to Scrum Master and review. Sorry about these pop-ups. Review how to do it. And it adds these tags, it puts the acceptance criteria, and we're just going to say, you know what, we want to have them do it in the next sprint. We're going to hit save and close. And it created that work item right there. We're going to also add another work item here to say evaluate best practices for code reviews. And I'm going to keep that one assigned to myself. We're going to do it in the next sprint, hit save and close. And just like that, we've done our first retrospective as a team.
Absolutely, Damon. I think you've shown how retrospectives are easy to set up. Getting ready to go took seconds. Your team was able to kind of join on the fly. I love that they were live doing the demo with you. And you're going to group them. And what I love about retros is you add that into Azure Board so you can act on those tasks. Something my team used to do, and I saw you do it for the next sprint, was, we're going to take this action item. Our Scrum Master duties need to be improved. That we would put as a task at the front of our sprint so that we could see it when we were looking at our sprint board every single sprint. Because the other pitfall we had as a team that we would see a lot of is we'd have these action points and we'd talk about them, but they weren't written down anywhere. So the next sprint came along and be like, oh yeah, we talked about doing this, but nobody did it. Or, because you're so focused on the code or what other actions you're delivering or other things crop up. So I love having those as tasks in your boards for each iteration, each sprint cycle, so that you can act on it and you can actually fix that. Because sometimes as people, we forget what our priorities are for each sprint.
Yeah, April, that's a great call out. I think one of the things I've learned is teams some teams already know how to do retrospectives, and they just get in this habit of just doing retrospectives, and they forget why they do it, right? But what I recommend, and interestingly enough, is I recommend that they just pick 1 or 2 actions. And then in sprint planning, allocate capacity to complete those actions. And then what I'll show you in just a second in our second retrospective is how to actually track those action items in Azure DevOps, see how things are going. And what we find time after time after time again is when teams start doing retrospectives, after 2 or 3 retros, things are really, really a lot better, and they just get better faster. And you look back after 2 or 3 months and you can't believe how much progress you've made because you've dedicated a little bit of capacity.
Absolutely. So what's the next phase of our retro?
Yeah, so this one's really exciting to me because I had known about retros for years, and I mentioned I had done that. I had done that research to find out all these factors that contribute to teams thriving. And a lot of those factors were things that maybe you didn't expect, but once you think about them, they make an awful lot of sense. And so I asked myself the question, how could we take these ideas that make teams better, and how could we build them into the retrospective process? And so what I want to do now is I want to show everybody the tooling that we built. This tooling is actually available in retrospectives. It's a different type of retrospective. I call it a team assessment retrospective. So I'm going to go back to that retro board that I made. And now I'm going to create another retrospective, right? And we're going to call this just YT1. And in this particular one, we're going to keep the votes, and we're going to keep this checkbox, include team assessment. I'll talk about that in a second. And then we're going to keep everything there. Something that I like to do in this particular type of retrospective, I don't want to collect any feedback yet. I just don't want people to collect feedback. I want them to focus on the team assessment. Mm-hmm. And that's it. We're just going to hit save. Okay. And what it's done is it's created a retrospective. And before I get started on that, I mentioned the history tab, right? Mm-hmm. So now this is our second retrospective as a team. We click the history tab. And what we get to see here in the history tab is the entire history of teams' retrospectives. And we can just click this, and we can open up and review progress against the previous work items. I recommend that as a best practice. Before you start your next retro, open up the history, look at it, and make sure that you're actually closing action items. So we're now at this new board, and we have this team assessment. I'm going to go ahead and copy the link. I'm going to give it to my team, and I've asked them to please vote using team assessment. Typed wrong, but that's okay. Okay, and I've read the Prime Directive before. I read so I'm not going to read it again, but the team is in the background now doing this team assessment. And I want to talk just for a minute, if I could, April, about each of these factors, okay? And show teams how to do this. First thing is, we've got 6 dimensions of thriving teams. This first question is clarity. I clearly understand what's expected of the team. We've built this information box in here so teams can go in and understand why that question was chosen and do just a little bit more research on why to use it. So clarity, for example, 5 to 10% improvement in productivity. Energy, this is a really excited one. I've felt excited to work every day this past sprint. This is all about employee burnout and employee thriving. We don't have time to go into the details, but we'll do some follow-up blogs to talk about this stuff. Psychological safety, I do want to talk about this one because this is really after doing dozens and dozens of these, this idea of psychological safety is it really is the foundation for retrospectives. And when I introduced the idea of psychological safety, which is I feel safe and do not fear making mistakes, raising tough issues, taking risks, or asking for help. When I raise this idea, it literally changes the games for teams, and they think about, wow, is it safe on this team? And I give them a process to improve psychological safety. Work-life balance, we added that because of COVID and the impact of work-life balance. Confidence, this is a question that our research indicates basically is a predictor of the success of the team. And then efficiency, we every once in a while add these experimental questions in here. And we've added this efficiency question just to help teams really focus on how to make improvements in overall efficiency. So my team is in the background. They've done the team assessment. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the dots. And this is a bit of a tricky step, but I'm going to go back to the dots and I'm going to click this show retrospective summary. And you can see what's happened here is that in the background, we've collected anonymously the feedback from the team on these different dimensions. The team has voted on how they personally feel. And it shows that we have an opportunity for psychological safety on this team. And remember, I mentioned that psychological safety is the #1 predictor of high-performing teams. So let's see, for this team, let's see how we can use the retrospective board to actually improve psychological safety. So I'm going to click on Discuss and Act here. That button right there, that was kind of quick. Let me slow down just a bit. I'm going to click on this Discuss and Act button. And what's going to happen is it's going to create a new board. All right. And in the back, it created a board that helps the team identify what is it on this team that makes it safe, what is it on this team that hinders safety, and what's one action this team can take. So let me let them know to start adding feedback items. And they're going to do the same thing that we did previously here.
Awesome.
On this board.
And is this anonymous as well? Since
oh,
it
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm glad you asked that question, April. So the team assessment is always anonymous. The Azure DevOps collects the data anonymously and confidentially and stores it in the background.
I think we talk about psychological safety a lot in the DevOps world, in the tech space. And we talk about it in terms of not only productive teams, we use the words developer velocity. We have all sorts of great phrases how we that play into how psychological safety is critical to our team success. And I love that you can get the feedback and people can give the anonymous feedback because sometimes it could be personality clashes, sometimes it could be technical issues, but usually the psychological safety is a culture thing. And when we talk about DevOps processes, 80% of DevOps is the culture side of it. So this addresses that head on anonymously, and it's something that gives you action for the next sprints. And I've been on so many projects where we can talk about all the things that come through. We can see what everyone's filling out here. I love that people are trying to find a safe space. They enjoy the safe space to have that constructive feedback because we also don't want to blame people, right? And it's okay to fail because we learn by failure, and making that a safe place to do that.
Yeah, let me build on what you're saying. So this idea of psychological safety, it's really taking off at Microsoft and with the teams. And what we've found in our research is on the order of 60% of the teams have at least one member that does not feel psychologically safe. 60%. And we're the most recent data I looked at, less than 10% of the teams have all members that feel completely psychologically safe. I've been on a team where this retrospective process resulted in a team feeling psychologically safe, and I got to tell you, it was one of the best experiences of my life. What we find with this new retrospective process is that teams think that it's safe, but until you ask anonymously, you don't realize it's safe. And if you're conducting retrospectives and it's not psychologically safe, I can guarantee you're not getting the value from retrospectives. So my team in the background, they've continued this. Let's go ahead and go through this process one more time. So I'm going to remember I'm zoom out here just so I can see this. And they want to talk about they have this idea of a working agreement and sort of this camera, which had come into place. And I've clicked on group. I'm just going to put those two together, right? And then they also have these ideas where they just want to do some more hanging out, right? And so I'm going to put those two together in the grouping. And then I'm going to go over and have them vote. And let's see what pops up. By the way, while we're waiting,
I think the coffee chats and morale events will definitely get some votes.
Let's see what happens here.
Yeah. I think especially as we work in very remote teams. I mean, I've worked on teams that are globally dispersed for many, many years now, and not having that connectivity in your team, especially in an era where we don't travel, we don't see each other. We need to find the ways to bring our teams together.
Yeah. So
how
it
does voting look? What's winning?
Well, we got retrospectives every month is showing up. Coffee chats formalize the expectations of the meeting, and reducing required meetings are a little lower. But there's only 7 votes so far. So I think that, oh, look at that. Looks like there's a lot of votes. Ooh. Looks like this team has some feedback about cameras and this retrospective process. They're actually wanting to go in and do the retros. So let's look at the act. Let's look at the act button. Just want to remind you, you can go retrospective summary. We can see that we had 6 participants, casted 29 votes, 18 feedback items. And it looks like this team feels like in order to improve psychological safety, they want to they want a working agreement, right?
Mhm.
And by the way, one of the top things that come out when I do this workshop is working agreements for teams, a very
Yes.
simple thing teams can do to have enormous impact. And then they
And
want to
it's
do,
interesting how many teams don't have a working agreement. And it's something that I can speak from a firsthand experience at Microsoft. It's something every team I've been on has written a working agreement at the beginning of every financial year or major team change.
yeah. And we have actually developed a process in the background about where teams are using the retrospective board to create working agreements, interestingly enough.
And that's
So,
pretty cool.
all right, just real quick, I'll just show you the work item again, just to reiterate it. So this is create a working agreement. They're going to allocate capacity to that. And in this one, remember the last retrospective we had, we said, let's allocate Scrum Master capacity. So now we're going to just go in and we're going to say schedule retrospectives at the end of each sprint. And I'm going to keep that one for myself. We're going to start a next sprint. And with that, I'm going to close teams. Yeah, and so that's retrospectives there. In just a couple of minutes, we were able to show you how teams can use a standard retrospective to identify what works well, not works well, and use this new teaming assessment retrospective to really identify, quantify the factors to help them thrive and focus on making improvements. And I'll tell you, we've been doing this I've been facilitating sessions across Microsoft for a little bit more than a year. And every team that sees this is super excited about it. They start using it, and very, very, very quickly, they make changes that have a radical impact, not only on the quality of their work, but on the quality of their lives.
I think it's fantastic. I have not been able to use the team assessment recently. It wasn't around when I was doing retros a lot more frequently than I am today.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fantastic feature. It's such an important component to how we deliver software, how we deploy our applications, and how we work together as teams. Again, the culture thing, especially in the time of where we're either hybrid or remote working still to this day. And we want to make sure everyone's as productive as they can. So Damon, thank you so much for coming onto the DevOps Lab and showing us all about Azure DevOps Retrospective. So that was a pretty awesome deep dive. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. And for everyone tuned in, join us next time on the DevOps Lab.